Center Library, the first Black library in Southern Ontario. With us today, we have our very first guest, an author by the name Cecily Couchet-Alexander. Now, Cecily Couchet-Alexander wrote a book, a very interesting book on immigration. The book's title is called Immigration, Race and Survival from Trinidad, Living in Parallel Worlds. This memoir has been an eye-opener for the author, and hopefully it will be for the reader. Cecily Alexander will help you understand the racism as you journey with her through her many experiences. Cecily Couchet-Alexander has always written and journaled. This memoir is a collection of many journals she has kept over the years. She uses journaling as a way of working through feelings, emotions, and of learning her experiences. She has had a career as a dietitian for over 40 years. Her career has included academic writing, and she has one previous book publication, a book on nutrition and weight loss. The book's title is called Just Eat Less, Easier Said Than Done. She has a master's degree in business administration, specializing in organizational behavior, in addition to her nutritional degree from the University of Guelph. She has taught at both university and college levels, and right now she lives in Southern Ontario. Welcome, Cecily. It's
Thank you.
To have you.
I'm really excited about this interview.
Yeah. Now, you come from a mixed race background. To start off, would you tell us your experience with that? Would you tell us more about your family, specifically your father and mother?
Thank you. That's a really good question. My father, I'll start off with my father. He was a very proud Trinidadian and very proud of his French heritage. He would say to me, "Remember your pouchette." This was extremely important to him. And my grandfather, he presented himself as a white Trinidadian, although I think he would have been mixed. And he lived in Tobago with his family, with my father and his 3 brothers and his sister, 5 kids. And he worked at Fort George. Anyone who has been to Tobago will know the famous fort and communications. And for many years, when I visited Tobago on our summer vacations, my mother would point out the family house because it was still in existence for years after that. My grandfather brought his family to Trinidad so that all 4 of his sons could attend Queen's Royal College, which is one of the premier secondary schools. That was important for him to do. My father and his brothers all had professional jobs growing up, but my father was actually famous for his cricket career. He played cricket for the West Indies. Really well recognized, and because I'm named after him, he's Cecil Couchet, and I'm Cecily Couchet. As a child and as a teenager growing up, people will recognize my father in my name. He played actually way back in the 30s and 40s. So that's more or less my father's family. My mother, you would realize that I dedicated my memoir to my mother. Loved my mother. She was such a strong personality that came across that way in terms of how she did and how she carried herself. She actually convinced my grandmother to give her inheritance early and brought this in a suburb of Port of Spain, which is our capital, bought this expansive country land of which she divided up, sold part of it, and built our family home. Our family home actually was owned by my mother. Very entrepreneurial in terms of a lot of things that she did over the years. But in addition to that, telling you a little bit more about my mother's side of the family, my grandfather was a pharmacist and lived in sort of Blanchisseuse. It's sort of a rural part of Trinidad. And I have a picture of it in my book. He built the first electric pharmacy, it was called. And because he died in 1908, I looked up just today to see when Trinidad got electricity, and it was only in 1895. So this was fairly early in electricity being in Trinidad for him to have had this accomplishment. He died in 1908 of pneumonia. So my great uncle, who again was someone I was very looked up to and was admired, my great uncle brought his sister and my mother and kids into Port of Spain and set them up with the money from their estate into a home in the street next to his street. And in addition to that, he bought another house which provided an income for them to live on. So that's the story of both sides of the family, but very proud family.
Interesting enough, because it looks to me that you come from a very well-to-do family in terms of financials and the like. Would you tell us what it was like growing up in Trinidad? And on top of that, would you tell us your educational background?
Well, my educational background, I did my A-levels in Trinidad. We still had departmentals posted to England to be corrected, and you got the papers, and everyone in the island could see your marks because they were published. So I passed my O-levels and A-levels with good marks, and my brother, who was in Canada, in Edmonton, studying engineering, was the one that wanted me to come up to Canada to do my university degree and not in the West Indies. I actually went to the University of Guelph, where, as you mentioned, I'm a dietitian, studied nutrition. And because I got into management, I did my undergraduate in business at Wilfrid Laurier, and then went back to do my MBA at Guelph again. So 3 degrees, and of course my nutrition degree plus my internship. But it's interesting, almost every year I did a course somewhere. I was education and being a university student, and I think of myself as an intellectual. I always wanted to, there was always something I was curious about to take an extra course on. I did create a writing course too.
So you came to Canada as a student. At what age did you arrive in Canada?
19, just right out of A-levels, very young.
So when did you start writing?
Well, I have always journaled and wrote, as you mentioned, in my career. It's interesting with nutrition. I really thought the ideal job would be working for a newspaper, doing their food column or their nutrition column, but realized that they wanted someone to have a nutrition degree, but also a journalism degree was as important. But in spite of that, within my career, I've always developed pamphlets, as I said, I've written a few academic articles. So that part of journaling for my book, there was piles of information. A lot of the things that I refer to in my book I have had in my journals.
So your book's title is on immigration, race, and survival. And then the subtitle says from Trinidad, living in parallel worlds. Can you tell us more on how you come up with this interesting title?
It's interesting writing because there's so many parts to it, and the big part was the cover. I'm actually quite pleased about my cover because I have depicted the Caribbean and I've also depicted the snowy hills in Canada. But race, I realized as I wrote, race played an integral part, and I talk about looking at my life here through the lenses of a race. So race had to be part of the title. And survival, because I see my experiences here and the survival of my life here is always surviving some experience or not. And again, from Trinidad to Canada, the parallel worlds is also important because that refers to the fact that I live mainly in a white world. My husband was white, most of my friends are. I hang out with some expats from the Caribbean, but for the most part, that's the parallel world. And one of the articles I wrote on my webpage talks about see my color, because I realized through writing this that a lot of my friends think they see me just like themselves, and they would say things that I don't see your color, but I say see my color, because I realized that I could be in the same environment with them. I have a few examples in my book, and I'm having very different experiences as a black person.
Interesting. So you became conscious of your blackness at a very tender age, and you mentioned about this, in your book, how your father basically, in certain occasions, would ask you to pull up your nose so that it becomes long. It basically matches the features of white, and then he would also say some other things like bite your lips, just so that can you tell us what that meant to you at that time, when you were very, very little, and what it means to you right now, looking back at those memories?
It's really interesting because it's funny how you see your parents and you interpret things that you want to do or you don't do. And it actually didn't affect me in a negative way, because my aunt used to sort of tease me and say, you have a pug nose, and like Haley Mills, one of my very old childhood idols. So in terms of me, I decided I liked my nose. Even my lips, I thought, because there are people in the Caribbean with a lot bigger noses, bigger lips. The thing that I was very obsessed with in terms of my blackness growing up was my hair. Because back then, you probably heard the term, even in Africa, good hair and bad hair. I was surprised when I read President Obama's book. He talked about his sister in Africa talking about good hair or bad hair. It's something used very commonly. And growing up, I had my aunt, my grandmother, and even my mother under the category of good hair. My aunts would say to me, to anyone that would listen, I'm so glad the girl child has the better hair, referring to me and my brother. But I say in my book, better but still not good. So my mother, at the tender age, believe it or not, at 8, straightened my hair. So I had these long pigtails straightened, and as soon as, nothing like this. This would have been, oh my God, So as soon as there was an inch of curls coming out, it was straightened again. I really didn't even know this text day. I didn't know what my hair was like, as it was straightened at such a young age. And I describe in my memoir, interestingly, at university, and back then I went through all these rulers, and after I shampooed my hair and set it and dried it, And one day, first year of university, 1972, my hair dried naturally. And one of my roommates came in and said, Cecily, I love your afro. I said, afro? And when I looked at it, it had dried naturally, and I loved it. But that was also 1972, at the peak of the Black is Beautiful stage. So I was very pleased with my afro at the time. But, in terms of hair, it's something kind of funny. In my memoir, my husband, who was white, blue-eyed, as wasp as they come, with Scottish background, had a very tight curl. And I would tease him and say, I've come all this way to marry a white man with kinky hair. Because all three of my sons have these fantastic afros, but if his hair was straight, I would have these beautiful curls, which is what I would have preferred. But it's in a way here, it's funny, it's not really doing things with your hair. Blacks spend the most amount of money on their hair with what I call, comes under the generic name as product. There's so much stuff that we put in.
Yeah.
And the afro for a while was easy and fun, but it's a bit boring, So since then, as you know, there's all of these new things with weaves and wigs and whatever to give blacks a bit more variety with their hair. I don't think it's trying to be white as much as it is just what they think is attractive. But we are now embracing our natural hair, and I love it.
Good. So during your first years as a young student in Canada, I wanted to, there are certain experiences that you talk about in your book, racist experiences, you were looking for a job and people could not give you a job. I want you to tell me a little bit, of your experiences in your early years in Canada and how you overcame that, just like the first 3 years in Canada.
Yeah. In terms of racism at the beginning, within the first years, I talk about not getting a job and thinking I was qualified enough for a clerical position that I would have easily got in the Caribbean before I started university. And this was difficult in Edmonton until this gentleman said to me, Cecily, I can't hire you because you're such a nice person, but I can't hire you because you're black, and I wouldn't lose my customers and my business. So at that point, it was very clear to me in terms of how I was being perceived. And at that point, it was hard to take, and I even said to my brother, I'm going back home. Why am I staying here in a place that doesn't want me to be here or thinks of me as a second-class citizen? But in the same, quickly, my mother's strength, I could hear her voice saying, come on, you can overcome this. So a lot of what I did at the beginning was, I really thought I could overcome a lot of the racist ideas by people just knowing me and seeing who I was, and liking me for who I was.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as Canadian racism and United States racism? You talk about this in your introduction.
Absolutely. And this is another thing that I've come to terms with in terms of Canadian racism versus realizing it's not any different from American racism when I actually get down to it. And when you actually think about that, how do Canadians know about blacks? It's the American history that they know about. They know about slavery in the States. They know about Jim Crow. They know about all the atrocities that the States have had in terms of separate bathrooms, separate schools, separate accommodation. And in Canada, I say that I'm not, you've talked about mixed race. They don't see mixed race. They see you as black or white, just like the States does. And their racism is influenced by that. All the negative stereotypes of of blacks being aggressive and angry and even inferior to some extent. Some of all of those impressions come across in the racism that you experience. Mm-hmm. So I don't think of it as different. I talk about West Indians, Trinidadians in particular, having, or actually anyone from the West Indies, having a different way of thinking about race, about ourselves. And we refuse to be put into these stereotypes. And I think it is, growing up, we had really good black examples of intelligent lawyers, doctors, politicians. Eric Williams, a brilliant scholar from Trinidad, all black. So we didn't think of ourselves as inferior in intellect or in any other way. And I think that also has an influence on how we react to prejudice in Canada, where we just don't accept it. It's interesting. I also talk, actually I don't talk about it in my book, but one of the examples I give is Sidney Poitier. In his book, mm-hmm. The Measure of a Man, I think it's called, Sidney actually, when he first came up to the States, actually, to Miami at the age of 19 in the 50s, had a fairly negative experience with racism. And he said, I refuse to be who they say they want me to be. And he had such a good, strong sense of self and who he was. And it's worth reading just to read this chapter and how Sidney thought about who he was. And he said, I refuse to be put into this category. My father was Reginald Poitier and his mother was Evelyn Poitier, and he talked about how they were and what an important influence they were themselves, and not this second-class citizen that the States wanted him to think that he was.
Mm-hmm. So apart from Sidney Poitier's The Measure of a Man, what other authors, black authors, have influenced your thinking about blackness?
Well, in writing my memoir, I went back. I was really interested in exploring Eric Williams's. I read his two books, The History of Slavery, The History of Slavery in Trinidad, and The Negro in the Caribbean, I think was the other one. But one of the books, whenever I go to Trinidad, I go to our university library and peruse and buy a few books. And one of the books I came back with is excellent. It's by someone by the name of Bridget Brereton. Mm-hmm. And she wrote, I'm trying to remember the exact title, but it was Colonialism from 1870 to 1900. Excellent, informative to me about our history. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking of what books in particular, but how I'm informed is actually not by books. It's by the news or politics and just being aware of what's going on right now in Canada and the States. I mean, what has influenced how I think in my writing is things like Carden and our prison system that is so disproportionate blacks and indigenous people. It's and how we are underemployed in terms of black professionals. I mean, the literature and that information is there. I'm actually a bit concerned now about what is being portrayed in the rise of white supremacy. I mean, it's not blacks, but we had that Muslim family killed. That was white supremacy. So it's a bit of a scary time right now, I think, in terms of racism.
Before I come to our very last question, I would like to know what you would say to young black boys and girls growing up in mixed communities from your experience.
Well, remember I said very early in my book that in Canada there's nothing mixed. You're black, or so in terms of black kids, I think they still have to be aware, and it's hard because they're born here and they think they're the same as their white or other ethnic groups, but it's still a challenge in terms of some of the aggression and what has happened to blacks and being picked up or carded. They have to be aware that that's there. What I've come to realize that is so important, because Canada is 73% white, right? And it's a percentage of those people are prejudiced or racist, but there's a whole group of whites that are not. So we have to find a white ally. It's not a black ally. Blacks have to find a white ally, of which I've had in my career too, that have helped to put my career forward, to help them get to achieve and to get more in terms of the work set and to get ahead. Mm-hmm. So allies and allyship is extremely important. Okay. I think I also say that, I was in a situation where, with a lot of microaggressions, where I could not get out of that situation. But in terms of that, I realized that if you're in a bad situation, you really just have to move on as a black person, is my advice.
So there is a poem, and this poem basically is going to introduce us to our second interview. Can you read us this poem? Because it is this poem that basically almost summarizes the entire part of your book. Can you read it to us?
Sure. And the page just before this, I said I had applied for this job and I thought it was going to be a seamless transition and very fulfilling and challenging, And I submitted my application. I didn't even receive an interview. And I'll explain in my next interview how I was blocked. Okay. So let's start off. This is March the 10th. March 2010, I wrote this. It's called Sticks and Stones. I understand and I accept sticks and stones may break your bones, but words won't hurt me. Actions won't hurt me either. My mantra, I will rise above the fray. I understand. Edmonton, 1969, a simple job, working a cash register. I apply and I'm told by a nice and polite man, I really want to give you a break, but black is bad for business. I think of my mantra, sticks and stones. I am not broken. I will rise above the fray. And education is what I need to rise, and it is 1972, 2 years of night school, and here I am at university. A spook go fetch off the boat, all said in serious jest. But these are words, they don't break my bones. I can rise above the fray. It's 1976, a nutrition degree in hand, I will rise above the fray. To Montreal I head, many blacks are there as well. It is open, outspoken, a great place to go. I've read To Solitudes, you know. But it is the same, no political correctness here. Nigger, jigaboo, I'm called. Don't they know it isn't sticks or stones, only words I say. I have risen above the fray. A year goes by, an internship finished. Ontario is my favorite province. A first job in London. I'm going to use the right places in this interview. A first job in London. My bags are packed. My Toronto friends say, London, so conservative, you know. They have given me my first job. They must be nice, I say. My education will help me to rise above the fray. Married in 1979, I'm off to Kitchener, Germantown. Is there prejudice, I wonder? 6 years later, a management degree part way, but no promotions to be had. Sad. but not forlorn, London beckons. My Toronto friends again say, London, it is so conservative, you know. They've given me my next job. They must be nice, I say. I will rise above the fray. 2 degrees in hand, I set out to make my way. Nice words and actions abound. No sticks or stones are thrown my way. Hard work builds a great reputation. But here's a new manager. Doesn't she know? Her words and actions begin to break me. My mantra falters. To be Canadian, you must change. I will fire you because you don't fit, you don't talk, or act like me, you know. Maybe 3 degrees would help. I cannot change the way I look, the way I talk. My personality is who I am, and education is what I need to rise above the fray. An MBA is the answer, everyone agrees. An MBA will help me rise above the fray. 3 years more education, I returned to Grenville town, to London town. I obtained some great experiences. I'm hired to teach and enroll great minds at the university. Even president of our college is added to my repertoire. I bide my time for the ultimate job to be advertised. It's 12 years, you know, since my MBA degree. Many of my colleagues call. Have you seen? It's there. Professional practice leader. I have all the qualifications. I apply with gusto. Every line, every word I check in my application. I wait. I do not understand. Calls abound. Have you been interviewed as yet? I do not know what to say. Sticks and stones, but my mantra doesn't work. Feeling broken. Education isn't the answer. It will not help me rise above the fray. And what I have said in the next sentence is that education did give me my professional career, but I was unable to really break the glass ceiling to get beyond a certain point. And I conclude, as Black women, I know we have to work twice as hard to get half as far.
Thank you very much, Cecily. It was nice having you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dear friends, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. Join us again next week on Monday. We'll be having an interview with Kenneth Lampkin, the London poet. Until then, have a good day.